Hello everyone, and welcome to our daily vlog at Kimmel Bay Church. Our text for today is taken from 1 Timothy chapter 3, and it's all about leadership, and specifically about the qualities a leader should have. But to be honest, they're probably qualities that we should all have anyway. Now, Paul was writing to his protege Timothy. You see, Paul's missionary journeys were incredibly successful and churches were popping up all over the place. The problem was, who was going to lead them? Paul had to find a generation of new leaders. The question is, who? Now, Paul started with a job description that set very high standards. It's interesting, actually. He doesn't mention qualifications or experience. He just looks for good character. Now, one of my most difficult jobs in my career as a school manager was to appoint new teachers. There was a whole list of tasks to carry out, one of which was to write a job description. Usually we were looking for an all-singing, all-dancing Superman or Superwoman. We used to analyse all the application forms for qualifications and experience, then watch the candidates teach a lesson so we could assess their abilities as a teacher, and very importantly to see how they interacted with the children and with other staff. Interviews sometimes took whole days, involving formal questioning and then probably the most useful part, informal chats over lunch or cups of coffee, to get the candidate to drop their guard and let their personalities come out. Sometimes we got it right, sometimes we got it wrong. Sometimes we had so many excellent candidates that it was difficult to make a decision. And some positions, there were so few candidates that we didn't know whether to appoint someone who wasn't quite ideal or to re-advertise. Now, Paul wrote to Timothy to describe exactly the sort of person who should lead the new churches. This is what Paul said. He said, "Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task." Now, the overseer is to be, now wait for this list, above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. He must not be a recent convert, or he might become conceited. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he won't fall into disgrace and into the devil's traps. Then he went on to talk about deacons. They should be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in too much wine, not pursuing dishonest gains. They must hold deep truths of the faith with a very clear conscience. Faithful to their wives, managing the children and their households well. And then he said they must first be tested, and then, if there's nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. The problem with Paul's list is that we're all flawed in some way. And if we used the text as a checklist, I wonder how many of us would actually fully meet the standard. The encouraging thing is the way Paul finished the chapter. He gave the answer that really, in the end, only Jesus was good enough. This is what he said. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed in the world, and was taken up in glory. Of course, Jesus was humble and caring, and he was called the servant king. And for leadership, I would say that's probably the most important characteristic. One of the most powerful images in the life of Jesus was when he washed his disciples' feet in John 13. When he finished, he said to them, "You call me teacher and Lord, And you are right, for so I am. If then the Lord and teacher washes your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. What Jesus really meant was that great leaders focus upon serving others. So what about other leaders in the Bible? What characteristics do they have? Maybe we could look at a few. Noah, for example. In Genesis chapter 6, God was despairing over the wickedness of the people and had reluctantly decided to wipe out the human race and start all over again. Noah, however, was the only one who hadn't been corrupted. So God told him to build the ark. He was ridiculed, but he was determined to obey God and do what was right. And of course he saved his family and a whole host of animals as well. Leaders do what's right, even when they're alone. What about Abraham? Well, Genesis 12, God told him to leave his comfortable life in Haran and take his family off into the desert. He obeyed God, stepped out in faith, and as a result led his family into the promised land, and he became the father of a great nation. Leaders are willing to risk everything for God. Joseph, Genesis chapter 37. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was framed by his boss's wife because he refused to sleep with her, and he was thrown into prison. He interpreted the dream of a prisoner who was then released, but who then forgot all about him. It was ups and downs. In the end, though, he became leader of the whole of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh. And when there was a famine, he saved his family from starvation. Leaders have what we call bounce back ability. They keep going even when things go wrong. Moses now, he made excuse after excuse not to go to Pharaoh to lead his people out of Egypt. In the end he did. Went across the Red Sea and for 40 years led the people through the desert and endured all the moaning that they made. Leaders are resilient. Joshua now, Joshua 24, after leading his people into the promised land, he offered the Israelites an option, either to serve God or to serve the gods of the surrounding lands. He said, "But as for me and my house, I will serve the Lord." The people answered that they would follow Joshua's example and follow God, which is what they did. Leaders lead by example. What about David, small shepherd boy, facing a 9-foot giant Goliath? And when Goliath mocked him, he said, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." With that, he took up a stone, slung it at Goliath's forehead, and killed him stone dead. Leaders are not afraid of giants, and they're willing to step out of their comfort zones. What about Isaiah? God said, "Who can I send as a prophet to my people?" Isaiah said, "Here I am, send me." Leaders don't wait to see if anyone else is going to step forward. They're willing servants. They're first to put their hand up. What about Daniel? Well, government officials who were jealous of him trapped the king into making a law that no god should be worshipped except the king for himself. When Daniel was caught praying, he was thrown into the den of lions. But he was miraculously unharmed. And even the king himself acknowledged the power of God. So leaders stick to what they believe, regardless of consequences. Another one, John the Baptist, Matthew 3. He was baptizing people, preaching about the coming of Jesus, when a group of self-righteous religious leaders came for baptism. He called them a brood of vipers. Leaders aren't afraid to pull people up for wrongdoing, but something crucial here. Matthew 7 verse 5. We must sort ourselves out first. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Peter, he said, 3 times he denied Jesus. But when he realised what he'd done, he wept bitterly. In Acts chapter 2, we see him speaking to crowds of thousands. So leaders don't become discouraged or give up when they fail. They learn from their mistakes, pick themselves up and do better next time. And finally, Paul, a very zealous person, opposed to the spread of Christianity. But when Jesus appeared to him, he became a loyal and dedicated follower himself and travelled all over the world, fired up to spread the message about Jesus, establishing churches wherever he went. Leaders are passionate for what they believe in. So there we are. Leaders have very important qualities to set an example to the church, but all Christians need these same qualities to set an example to non-believers. So there we are, a list of qualities that we all need to aspire to. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. Bye now.